Cool. So, welcome everyone to V DAO's monthly Twitter Spaces. My name's Chris, and for those that are joining for the first time, V DAO is a community of ecosystem builders at the intersection of the physical and digital, and we're focused on developing regenerative network states. If you want to find out more about that concept or what we're up to, you can check out our community portal at vdao.io, or you can join us on Discord, and the link is in the comments. Ben's dropped that in there. On today's Spaces, we're really excited to welcome GoodDollar's Executive Director, Anna Stone. We'll be diving deep into the topic of UBI, programmable money, and exploring a bit about how those concepts and kind of primitives and tools will fit into a regenerative network state. If you have any questions as the conversation is unfolding, you can drop them in the comments on Twitter as we go. We'll do our best to pick them up at the end. We'll also give space at the end of the session for people to jump in and ask any questions that they might have. So we'll open up the floor towards the end. And we'd really appreciate it if everyone could retweet the spaces. Let's bring in as many people as we can into the conversation. And finally, before we kick off, I just want to thank Anna for taking the time out of her busy schedule to join us for the spaces today. Thanks a lot, Anna.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
Cool. So that's all the formalities. Let's kick things off with the first question. Anna, I wonder if you could introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your why. What is it that brings you into the crypto space as a builder?
Hi, guys. So thank you, V DAO, Chris, Ben, for having me. And those of you who are spending your afternoon tuning in, thanks for joining. Please do comment and write questions or through the thread so we can make sure that this can be as enjoyable and educational for you guys as possible. So what actually brought me into the crypto space has been a long-standing intellectual interest with money and how money actually in many ways is the invisible god that motivates so much of how our world works and how much we behave as human beings. And I've always been really curious in money from a behavioral sense in terms of money has so much to do with our identity, who we are, what we buy, what we wear, where we live, how we spend our money. It's such a reflection of our choices and the communities that we keep. And there is so much variation across cultures and communities across the world. Of course, inequality is part of that, financial inequality. But every community is its own little ecosystem with its own values, and yet we all use this tool called money that enables us to live together and to collaborate and create markets. And so that real human interest is what drove me to study economics and philosophy, which is where I'd say my journey with thinking about money began. And when I was starting my career, I started to work in microfinance, specifically on the nonprofit side, specifically in the idea of microcredit. How could you actually get money into low-income communities, and how could that be used to stimulate growth, and how that would actually be a sustainable model that would be superior to building markets than, say, just giving cash as aid into poor communities. And so I worked for a number of years at the Clinton Foundation and Save the Children in economic development programs. I moved my career into technology, worked in enterprise tech for a number of years, but in around 2017 is when I first got hip to what was going on in Ethereum and this new concept called blockchain. And blockchain was this, and decentralized ledger technologies were going to be the substrate that allowed us to really innovate on what money is or could be. And I was hooked. And so I fell down the crypto rabbit hole like so many people. I was really driven to the potential and the big story for where crypto could have the biggest impact, which was really expanding financial services and access to capital markets through using new technological systems and ones that would hopefully increase the freedom that individuals enjoyed in terms of their ability to access that. Um, and that drove me to crypto. And so I've been in this space since then. Since 2017, I worked on a project called Bancor, which was a really important early DeFi project that established one of the first decentralized exchanges on Ethereum. We built a lot of really pioneer tech, some of the first cross-chain bridging, cross-chain wallets, um, a lot of AMM and liquidity provider innovation. And so I really, started in the depths of DeFi, but ultimately moved on to working with a team to create GoodDollar, which I'm sure we'll talk more about, which is a universal basic income protocol, and have a pretty interesting scope on how crypto and impact and communities have all evolved over the past few years of the space. So that's a little bit of my journey.
Wow, super interesting. So you bring like the economics background and philosophy and DeFi all together, all into the space. Super interesting.
Well, it's all one thing, right? I think that was one of the most interesting unlearnings, if you will, through studying economics, is that when I studied, I had a traditional, I would say a conventional education, in that you study all of the major, Keynesian economics, and you study business in a larger sense, and you learn about Adam Smith's rational man, and all of this is taught to you as if it's any reflection of how people actually behave in the real world, or if it's any reflection of how money actually works practically for people. And in fact, we all know that individuals make, you know, irrational decisions about money all the time. And there are many inefficiencies that exist in the market just because of humans, right? And so once you recognize that what you've been taught is really just a framework that can also be deconstructed and reassembled, and we can think about money and value transfer differently, that was required for me to really appreciate the power of blockchain and how we could build token-based incentive systems that really enabled us to think differently about how human collaboration could work.
I love it. It sounds like you were really inspired by the technology as well, and like trying to find ways to kind of apply, like have real world impact, I guess, through using this technology. And kind of in that sense, I'm wondering if we can double click on, you mentioned your project, GoodDollar there. I'd love to hear more about that, but also just this concept of universal basic income in general. Like what is universal basic income, or UBI? And also another question I'll throw into the mix in relation to this is like, what are the benefits for bringing crypto into this UBI space?
Sure. So let's start with the more macro lens in terms of what is universal basic income and why blockchain. So universal basic income is a long-standing concept that has been around almost as long as modern markets itself, since the 1700s. But the idea is that every single individual in a society receives some sort of baseline income level, stipend, giveaway, whatever you want to call it, but they receive some amount of money for being a human being that's alive. The principles of UBI are that it's unconditional, so it's not conditioned by who you are, what you do. It's individual. It's designed to enable, and it's designed to go to people in an ongoing way, if you will. So it's a way to approach the social safety net. I think if you're an American, most people became familiar with the concept of UBI through Andrew Yang's presidential run in 2016. It was where he talked about UBI and giving $1,000 a month to every American, and that would be a more efficient use of the social safety net. And the reasons for that is that the belief behind UBI is that if you give people some sort of baseline income and enable people to spend cash the way that is, most useful to them, individuals know the best way to meet their own needs, and ultimately that will result in better societal outcomes, such as better levels of health, better levels of education, better levels of happiness, etc. So UBI is actually a concept that's been studied in a number of pilots around the world, from Georgia to Crenshaw, California, to Kenya, many different pilots across the globe over the past decades that are designed to show that giving individuals a cash stipend actually helps improve their lives across a number of different more holistic metrics, rather than the perception of UBI, which is that if you give people money, it will result in them spending all of that money on vice, or quitting jobs and leaving the labor market and just living dependent on the state. So this is kind of where UBI stands today. And actually, recently there's been a number, since COVID, there's been a number of basic income studies that I think have been following the stipends that they gave during the COVID relief packages. There's really been a new acceptance, I'd say, culturally, around the fact that giving money to people is probably one of the more respectful and autonomous ways to actually offer aid in a society. And Sam Altman recently funded, and AI, factors into this as people start to think about, what's going to happen when AI eliminates jobs. Many people discuss universal basic income as a potential solution to that. And so there's really been a new urgency, I'd say, over the past 2 years, as AI has really taken hold of people's imagination in terms of thinking about, okay, will we need to prepare to deliver a universal basic income to citizens? If so, how do we do it? And so Altman and a number of other technologists have recently funded a range of different UBI studies that are based off of evaluating the impact of UBI, different populations throughout the US. And, the results are overwhelmingly positive in terms of increasing the well-being of the recipients, quite unsurprisingly. So that's a briefer or primer of UBI and kind of where it came from and where it stands today in 2024. Why blockchain? It's because when people ask, like, okay, UBI, nice idea, how are you going to do it? And how are you going to do it breaks down into the actual, like, how are you going to go through the mechanism of distributing money to people, right? Like, how do you actually transfer money from the state to the individual, or from some other non-state UBI mechanism to an individual? And then also, how do you pay for it, right? Like, how actually do you pay for it? Where does the money come from that's going to fund giving away money on a mass scale to individuals? And so, if you guys remember from the COVID distributions, like the government is not set up to give money to people, right? Like, that was a really quite cumbersome process in terms of they're sending checks in the mail. They need to have the address that's based off of where you filed your tax return. You're getting this ridiculous check that's signed by Donald J. Trump. People are like swapping checks, losing checks, can't find checks. Some are being done via direct deposit, etc. So, like, the government in general is not particularly well set up to transfer money to individuals, but the blockchain is an incredible technology for this, in terms of really, if in a digitally native way, how can you, in a secure network, ensure that money goes to individual wallets at one time? How can you distribute that at mass, etc.? So on a functional level, in terms of how do you actually build the financial pipes, blockchain is probably the most superior technology that we have today, in terms of it being the cheapest, most efficient, most transparent technology layer upon which we can really distribute funds at scale, right? The second component is, how are you going to pay for it? Is obviously the money needs to come from somewhere, but I think blockchain or capital needs to come from somewhere. But I believe that blockchain technologies can actually help us take money that comes from somewhere or source the money that comes from somewhere a bit more creatively, right? So imagine that, with these large language learning models, that they're going to license every time that someone uses something, there's a licensing fee, and all of this is happening from computer to computer, code to code, payments, access, licensing, etc. How do you take the 0.003 cent that's being allocated to fund UBI and effectively get that 0.003 cent into some sort of pot that then is used to fund, let's say, like a multi-trillion-dollar UBI fund, right? How do you actually make those pipes work? How do you, from a cost perspective, make it work? Well, if you're using, the answer is that if you're using fiat solutions as they stand today, it doesn't work, right? So there's no way that you can build that in an efficient way that where the system operates for less than its cost if you think of doing it in fiat. When you think about doing it in blockchain, all of a sudden it really unlocks the number of sources of capital that you can tie into one productive system to fund a productive UBI. You can actually get a transparent view into what the money supply is, which means that you can potentially use it to generate yield, to leverage it. There's all different sorts of transparent financial engineering that can be done on top of it, where all members of the system can see how the treasury is being used. So I think when we're thinking of the future, the intersections and the synergies between blockchain and building an at-scale universal basic income system that could support millions or billions of users, to me, it just seems like quite an obvious match.
This makes so much sense. I guess I didn't actually think about this just on a basic level, that how bad governments are at just distributing funds to people. But that example you gave with the checks is so relevant here, right? Just the simple task of getting money into people's bank accounts. There's so much complexity and administrative kind of tasks associated with that, right? And I imagine so much cost must have gone into that, even just processing those payments. And then, as you mentioned, people are losing their checks, or they're and then there'll be a whole other administrative cost attached to sorting all those problems out afterwards as well, I imagine.
Exactly.
Cool. So I think the use case and the problems that it solves are so clear. Where does GoodDollar fit into this? Can you give us a kind of overview of your project and what you've been building?
Sure. So GoodDollar is one crypto universal basic income project, but I think it's important, and we started in 2020, and I think it's important to note that there were and are and will be many other crypto universal basic income projects in the future, and that's because this is an area where we need much more experimentation, right? So there's not one right way to approach a universal basic income system. We actually need a proliferation of approaches, but GoodDollar took a very specific approach, which was based off of actually efficient based off of the idea of how do we let money flow to where it's needed most, right? So this is the concept that we learn about in economics, which is that the markets are efficient, and because of that, capital will flow to the places where it's needed most, right? However, in reality, we know that's not true, because if you go to the places, capital is actually the most abundant in places where it's the cheapest, right? And when you actually go to places like many markets in emerging markets, those are the places where you're seeing interest rates upward of 20% on capital, even though those are places where, capital is the most needed, right? In order to stimulate micro entrepreneurship, in order to stimulate spending, in order to really stimulate economic growth, right? So GoodDollar was a particular approach that myself and a group of other amazing builders who we all worked together at the beginning. I'll shout out to Hardar Rodenberg, Tomer Bariach, Yoni Asia, of course, Tal Oren. a group of us got together and started to think about how could we play with this concept of letting money flow to where it's needed most in an open model. And so what GoodDollar is an open system where anyone in the world that has a mobile phone can sign up, and you basically verify yourself as a unique member of the community. And once you have done so, you have a wallet that's able to claim digital universal basic income every single day. And you're able to claim your GoodDollar tokens as a portion of your UBI every single day, along with other members of the network. And the model is really geared towards the 1.7 billion unbanked people in the world, that a billion of which also have cell phones, right? So because of mobile phone technology and its pervasiveness, all of a sudden now all of these individuals that have never been able to get a bank account per se are able to open a non-custodial wallet and are able to have access to digital financial services through blockchain, just through the nature of having a phone, right? And so that was our goal, was to really reach non-financial, non-technical people in emerging markets that otherwise have very little access to capital, and to give away GoodDollars every day in a model that those individuals could claim those tokens and potentially start to operate with those tokens, use those tokens, right? What is the value behind GoodDollar? How does it have any value? What we actually did was we used an automated market maker that's basically inspired by the concept of the Federal Reserve, right? So, or a reserve-based system. So GoodDollar itself has a reserve that is held in dollars. And over time, we have very, very slowly leveraged the minting of GoodDollars relative to the reserve. So we didn't do there was no ICO, there was no token generation event. It's not like GoodDollars were minted into thin air on day one. Actually, for every 10 GoodDollars, for example, there was $1 that was backing it. And so the token has been liquid since the day the protocol launched, which was actually like 4 years ago today. And that liquidity has enabled individuals around the world to really use GoodDollar as money, right? Because even if the value of each individual GoodDollar is cents on the dollar, as long as you're able to take your GoodDollars and somehow convert them back into stable coins or convert them back into ETH, then you are able to, then they can work like money, right? And so GoodDollar today, actually, as I mentioned, we launched around 4 years ago in September. We've onboarded over 900,000 people around the world to the protocol. We are one of the most widely used protocols in dApps in all of blockchain. So we have around 100,000 weekly active users. And very excitingly, we've seen in communities all around the world, particularly in low-income communities, individuals that are really highly motivated and entrepreneurial do incredible things for their community using GoodDollar that really have improved their economic well-being. So that's a high-level view of the project and the UBI model and how it's being used.
Wow, super interesting. I actually didn't know that it had been around for 4 years. That's amazing. It's like I knew it was a well-established project, but I didn't realize it was quite so long. That's very cool. I wanted to pick up on this point you made earlier about like how UBI is meant to be like unconditional in a sense in the way that it's giving out. And so I'm imagining from what you've described that there's no kind of, it's not like the users are performing any work in exchange for the tokens that they receive. Is that right? They're receiving this as part of their participation in the protocol. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I'd say the work is the attention, right? So there is a range of behavioral economics at work here, which is that, there's a question of when the money is distributed every day and it's worth, let's say, less than a cent, right? Is it worth your time and attention to remember to do it? That's a personal question, right? If you're an American or you're in a Western economy, then probably there are easier ways for you to get that cent, right? It's probably, and it's probably not practically relevant or of value situation. You're living on, say, $10 a day or $20 a day or even $200 a week, and you're living in a hyperinflationary economy where your own fiat is depreciating every single day. And GoodDollars is actually an asset that's marked in dollars that you have access to and can get for free. Well, for hundreds of thousands of people around the world, it is worth their attention, right? To come in and log in and claim every day. Now, we've made the claiming experience super simple. It's literally pressing a button. That's what it requires in order on a user's behalf. But the principle of small individual distributions is also part of the protocol design that's really designed to, have GoodDollars be claimed by people who need them the most, who want them the most, who value them the most.
Cool. That makes a lot of sense, and I can see the clear use case for the blockchain technology here in terms of like scalability. It's international. You can distribute these tokens so easily to people right across the world in multiple different economies and different parts of the world. So that all makes so much sense, and I think it's so clear that the blockchain tech is a major step forward to the traditional finance system in terms of distributing UBI from that sense, from that perspective. But I'm curious about like the kind of volatility angle within crypto in general, and like how you manage that in terms of like perhaps the UBI has on if it's on chain, it has the token has a different value on one day compared to the next day, depending on what's happening in the markets and stuff. Like how do you manage that aspect of the protocol?
Yeah, it's a great question. So that's actually part of the core design of the protocol, was that we really wanted it to be liquid and have a small amount of volatility, but not have the type of volatility that you see basically across all liquid tokens in the crypto market, where, especially like small market cap tokens or meme coins, right, where their volatility can be so extensive, right? We wanted GoodDollar to be reliable enough or predictable enough in price that people would feel comfortable using it for commerce, right? And I think we all know that no one wants to be the guy who spent 10,000 Bitcoin on pizza, right? So if there's a perception that the 10,000 GoodDollars that you have in your wallet are going to be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars one day, then of course you're not going to spend it, right? You're gonna hodl it. And so for us, actually proactively managing against the overall market volatility of crypto was a core part of the design. And that is why we did a reserve-backed model, which has the effect of GoodDollar has never functioned. It's not a stable coin. It's never functioned as a stable coin. But because of the reserve-backed model and the fact that we are only minting new GoodDollars as real money, aka dollars, are being added to the reserve, it provides a certain amount of price stability or predictability for the token, which has essentially functioned since the beginning of the protocol.
Cool. So the volatility is kind of baked in a way, but not to the extreme, and you've kind of managed that through the backing of the token. I'm wondering, it kind of leads.
Yeah, the backing of the token and the token supply, right?
Yeah.
So you can actually, that's one of the things. That's one of your monetary tools.
Super interesting. So I'm wondering, it kind of brings us into the realm of community currencies. We're kind of going there with the conversation. I'm wondering if we can open up that space and think a bit more about that. Like, I guess first question would be like, what is a community currency? And like, is there a relationship between UBI and community currencies?
Sure. So, first of all, to define a community currency, I think it's useful to remember that many and all of us now are pretty accustomed to operating in a multi-currency world, right? So I think there was a period of time where many of us didn't even understand what a multi-currency paradigm could look like. And I think now with crypto, it's much more intuitive and real to individuals how we do operate in a multi-currency paradigm. Not all currencies function in the same way or do the same things or we use in the same way, but there are many ways that we can, many different types of currencies, crypto and fiat, that can exist in parallel. And so community currencies are a pre-crypto concept, which is actually based upon how can we give members of a given community, whether that's a geographical community or an interest-based community, think about like a sports club, right? How can we actually enable a way for individuals to buy and sell goods or services amongst one another in this affinity group where they don't have to spend their fiat, right? Because we all know that, we get a certain amount of money every month from our job or from wherever, and then that has to go to our rent, to our taxes, to our utilities, for our food, etc. Like our fiat, for the most part, is allocated, right? But many of us have additional skills or gifts or abilities that we can of value that we can contribute. And the question is, how could another currency, where let's say if you're in a given community, could you say, for example, tutor someone's kids in order to buy something at a local bakery, right? And there's a way for you guys to actually collaborate using a local community currency rather than just like barter, right? The off chance that the baker's kids actually need the tutoring, right? Within communities where there are swaps of value that are happening all the time, is there a way that there's a currency amongst the members of these communities that would actually enable them to do more things together without having to touch their fiat, which we all know is precious, right? And so that's kind of the history of community currencies. I'd say like if you are interested in learning more about community currencies, which you should be, I hope everyone is, because it's a fascinating space and teaches you so much about how people behave about money. The father of community currencies is an economist named Bernard Lietaer, who has since passed. But if you look at he has an extensive library of books that he's published as early as the 70s and a number of wonderful YouTube videos that I'm happy to share afterwards, where he really discusses the use cases behind community currencies and how it could be applied in all different sorts of contexts. There is a longstanding community currency that's used in a business context for shipping companies that are in like the Swiss Austrian area, right? That's actually a community currency that has existed, continues to exist, but it's amongst like a certain set of businesses. And his books start to feature that, as long as a number of early community currency experiments that have happened throughout the 2000s, primarily that are focused on physical communities, right? Creating neighborhood economies, encouraging money and spending to stay within the community and increase local commerce and local spending. And so that's like a primer on community currencies. And of course, when we think of crypto, because it's digital, our concept of what a community is can immediately expand beyond just the geography. And so I think for those of us who have an interest in community currencies, crypto, I mean, at least for me in 2017, crypto really captured my imagination, because it is the type of technology that's required that would make community currency products, aka the ability for each community to launch its own currency and, you know, effectively manage that. Blockchain is the technology that enables that. So that's why so many community currency geeks also have looked at blockchain as a potential enabling technology there.
I love that, and I share that kind of that. I also feel inspired by the technology and the potential it offers there in terms of community currencies. And I think,
Hello?
hello, can you hear me? Hello, Anna?
Anybody there?
Yeah, I'm here. Anna, can you hear me? Hello?
Is this thing on?
Hey, Anna, are you able to hear me, Anna?
Yeah, I hear you now.
It seems like maybe Chris. Chris, can you try talking and then see if Anna can hear you?
Yeah, I'm here. Anna, can you hear me now? Can you
Yeah, it
hear me,
seems like.
Ben?
Yep, I can hear you, Chris. Maybe if you want to hop off and then join back on, sometimes that'll fix the issue.
Okay, sure. I'll be right back.
Sorry, but
Yeah, I can't hear him.
yeah, Twitter has like these random technical glitches every once in a while. We've been very fortunate over the last few that we've ran that we haven't had any issues. So I guess it was just a matter of time, right?
Yeah, inevitable.
Yeah, yeah. All right, let's get him back up here. All right, Chris, I sent you a co-host invite. You can go ahead and accept that and see if that's solved the issue.
Can I call for questions to see if there's like anyone who has questions while we're getting Chris back online?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do so.
Yeah, I can talk. The next thing that I think makes sense to talk about is actually how different communities around the world have begun to use GoodDollar as a community currency, just because it's free money that anyone can access and communities can all onboard to it together, which has been one of the most fascinating parts of the experiment. But I'd really love to give, which I'm happy to talk about, but I um, would love to give the people that are here an opportunity to ask questions if they're interested in what they've heard so far.
Hey, Anna, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. Um, yeah, so the suggestion was to bring people up for questions. I think that's a great idea. Um, I've got like two more questions to ask, and then maybe we'll get people coming up who want to ask questions. So they'll be ready to go. I'll just ask another couple of questions, and then we'll open the floor. How does that sound?
Great. Perfect.
Cool. So before I got cut off, I was thinking like about the backing aspect of the community currencies, and I just wanted to double click on that a bit. And I'm thinking it back to our spaces last month with Marek from Cello, and we talked there about the potential to back currencies with ecological assets, like, for example, trees, or I guess anything could be, in theory, anything of value could be used to back a currency. I know historically, like tobacco leaves have been used, and shells, and so on. So I'm curious, like, what your thoughts are around that topic in terms of backing and the relationship between that backing and a community currency, and also potentially a UBI as well.
Yeah, I mean, they are all part of the money design space, right? In terms of thinking about how do we take things of value and better assign proper value to them, and how could those assets be used in such a way that they actually unlock more human value, right? So certainly thinking about ecological and nature-based assets and how they could be used to back currency is relevant here. You can imagine how that's related within a particular community, right? Because communities are actually those, at least, that are to exist in a given space, exist within a given ecological context, right? So in places, in islands, for example, where there's a range of assets, of nature-based assets and ecologies that need to be preserved, how could the act of preserving those assets actually back a new type of community currency that people within that island could use to conduct local commerce, right? How could the backing of those types of assets create some sort of perpetual trust where, as long as those assets are preserved, that people pay into it, and how could a runoff from that trust actually fund some sort of universal basic income for the residents of that given island, right? So it's definitely all related, and it's all within the currency design space, which is really, but ultimately it comes down to like first principles design, right? In terms of what are we trying to value, what values are we trying to express, and really what money problem are we trying to solve, like what type of markets are we trying to create. And that's where I think tokenomics is so fun for people that like these sorts of questions, is because you can really map out theoretical economies on paper, and now we basically have the technology tools to build products or systems that could make them real, right? However, there's been a lot of, having said that, there's a question of market readiness, right? And I think a lot of us in the crypto and impact space and the refi space and the regenerative economy space have, those of us who've been working in this space for a while, certainly I think have gone through the what is it, the bubble the bubble of optimism into the trough of disillusionment, just in terms of thinking about the hype cycle and how much ultimate long tail potential there is to use blockchain to make these types of systems real, but also how long a journey that is going to be in terms of creating the cultural change and the education alongside with like better tools, better markets that would make something like a nature-based or an ecological, sustainably based currency practical and real. I think we're going to have to do a lot more small scale experimentation before we see things like that happen at a large scale.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I'm curious, like, just because you've been around in this space for a while, I'm curious if you've seen, like, or if you can think of projects that are out there that are already engaging in this kind of experimentation that you respect what they're doing, or you're kind of excited by what's happening. Is there a couple of projects that come to mind?
Sure. So I think one of the things that I think I'll talk about projects that are up and working right now, but I think one of the things that we need to remember in the startup space is like we learn from failed experiments too, right? So one of the one of the things that you benefit from in terms of being around for multiple market cycles is you realize that like a lot of it's important that the ideas around ecological currencies, that there are more people aware of them and talking about them now. And it's also important that we're aware of the fact that we have done experiments like in 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. There were companies that were working on doing these exact types of projects and they didn't succeed, right? Or maybe didn't succeed is not the right word. They did pilots, they didn't work out, or they were small scale, they learned something, they weren't able to scale, right? It's not like we have a great example of a nature and asset backed currency right now. However, all the experimentation really matters, right? Because what the scope of what we're talking about is so broad and is going to take so much experimentation to really change the hearts and minds of people around what money can be and how money can work and what actually like a degrowth economy could look like and how that doesn't result in necessarily destruction in the quality of life for all people on the planet, right? So I think it's complex to talk about these things in a way that to understand like what success looks like, because right now we're still so early in terms of trying to just like even understand what should we measure, right? Like what is success? Like what are the outcomes that we're driving towards? What are the nature metrics that we're driving towards? What are the capital metrics that we're driving towards? Like what are the values that we're trying to use these new systems to create in a real way? So that's like a little bit of philosophy, but I think it's meant to represent um, a call for all people to really think, to remember that we're so early in terms of experiment. Money innovation is an understudied field. There are more people looking at it now than ever before, but we're still nowhere where we need to be in terms of people aren't even studying, people who study economics in colleges, this isn't part of the curriculum, right? Like this is a niche interest area for people that like crypto and maybe use YouTube. So like we just need to be real about where we are and how many people on the globe understand these things, and recognize that we're quite early and that a lot more education and experimentation is going to be needed before these types of things start to scale and win the hearts and minds of millions of people. And that's the sort of conviction that's required in order to build markets. Having said that, there are a number of projects that I really admire in the space that I think have done a great job to try to build examples of what could happen, right? So I think probably the most well-established and my favorite community currency project is Grassroots Economics, which has been around since 2017. And this is led by Will Ruddick in Kenya. And Will is really a community currency pioneer, if you will. In terms of he's run, I think at this point, like over 40 different community currency experiments across different villages in Kenya that have been focused on creating local markets and local economies in places where individuals really don't have extra shillings to spare. And he uses blockchain-based technologies, and he also builds on Zello. So I think that's a great example. I think there's a new crop of companies that are coming out trying to really focus on savings and giving microcredit. A number of them also build across the Cello ecosystem. There have been a number of interesting recycling companies that have focused on actually tokenizing the value of recycled goods, which encourages people to clean up and preserve a natural environment. And so there are projects like Plastics, like Sylvie, like D-Trash. These are all projects that are focused around how do we incentivize people to do more local ecological preservation work, and therefore create a better environment while creating more income opportunities for the people that live there. So those are some examples.
Well, it sounds like in the Celo ecosystem in particular, like there's tons of experimentation in the space, and I love how you've kind of highlighted that as like the key mindset and approach in the space. Like we just need to see thousands of experiments happening so we can get, even if they're not successful, we're learning every time. I love that approach.
Yeah, I think, we have to be humble about how many things we're trying to change at once, right? So I think like one of the things that refi could be, one of the things I think about is how crypto and decentralized finance is still so nascent, right? And a lot of what crypto and DeFi is doing is taking existing finance and just putting it on blockchain, right? So these are systems and products and instruments that finance people understand for the most part. It's just using a new way of doing the business, right? It's a new technology layer. When we're talking about like the refi and the new economic space, there's multiple levels. That the problem isn't the payment system, right? The problem actually isn't the fact that like the digital wallets and moving stable coins between the digital wallets or levered tokens between the digital wallets. the battle that needs to be won is still like the hearts and minds around like what should we be valuing, how can we think differently about currency and markets, how can we think differently about growth, how can we think differently about our planet. Like it's a different battle to climb.
So more philosophical, kind of cultural questions about, I guess, going right back to your first point about like what is money and what role does it have in terms of value exchange in society.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
We've come full circle.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions for Anna? If you do, please come forward, request a mic. Ben will give you permission to come up and ask away. If anyone's got any questions for Anna, now's the time. I've got one more question, but I want to give space to see if anyone else is interested. Hey Joshua, welcome. Go ahead.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Thanks, V DAO, so much for hosting, and Anna for sharing. I have a kind of a two-part that are related. First one is, well, first of all, it's very important to think about the philosophical side of this, really important culturally. But for the projects out there that are looking and trying to develop their own solutions out there, how do you see potentially GoodDollar or other currencies as a solution that is somewhat turnkey so that people can deploy these solutions within their own microeconomy or their own community currency construct? And then the second part of that is, what about integration across platforms, across communities, potentially tying with GoodDollar or other very large scale ones? The value of integration between all of these potentially as forming a more stable global network of microeconomies and community currencies.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think this is where, the idea of financial infrastructure or protocol infrastructure is really critical to understand, right? So I think, GoodDollar as a protocol is giving out this money every single day, and we've seen different individuals and communities use it as a community currency because they're able to trade it peer to peer, wallet to wallet, right? So this is kind of like a bottom up community based approach to like how a community of 1,000 people in Brazil is able to use GoodDollar as a community currency. Well, the answer is basically like everyone signs up for a wallet, everyone claims GoodDollars, maybe someone buys a bunch of GoodDollars to accelerate it, and then people can get started, right? Of course, in that example, nothing's ever as simple as it seems because you need the people that are on the ground that are doing the evangelism, that are doing the education, that are actually like teaching people. And this is within a digital wallet product that's like actually really simple to sign up for and send and receive money peer to peer, right? So this is that's an example of where like on a protocol layer, on a technology layer, anyone in the world could set up a community currency using GoodDollar if you actually have the manual boots on the ground that's required to do the market education and the setup and convince the vendors to use it, etc. Right? And that's one of the biggest challenges with community currencies to date is that it requires a lot of on the ground coaching and advocacy in order to get all the market participants on board, right? And so we have examples of where it's worked, particularly in one community in Brazil that I'm thinking about in Corujinho. But the reason why, and it serves hundreds of the community. GoodDollar actually works as a community currency that serves hundreds of women within that community. But the critical success factor is that there is someone who runs the women's community who committed to her as part of her mission to enabling, women in her community to be able to use GoodDollar as a community currency so that they could do more beauty shop treatments and baking cakes and babysitting and all of the things that that people want and need that they don't have cash for, right? So that's a long answer in terms of saying anyone can do it, but it's hard, right? Using the existing tooling. There's also different projects, and a number of these I think are since out of operation, but there are a number of projects that focused on kind of like community currency launch platforms, right? Where any community could set up and launch their own currency. I've actually worked on a number of, consulted on a number of those projects, and that's the type of product that you want and you'd hope gets built, I'd say, like this next market cycle. But the reality is that because of the market education and the on the ground element, it's not that simple to do a community currency, right? So a lot of it is not just about the tooling. It's actually about the human physical infrastructure that's required to run a pilot. I don't mean that to sound discouraging, but that's kind of my take to your question. Is that helpful?
Yeah, definitely. There's the community culture needs to be prepared for that, and there has to be education. And I think it's some of, an appropriately designed.
Not just prepared for it. They have to want it.
Yes.
Right. There has to be someone within the community that wants it so badly that they're going to host the 30 education sessions that are designed to onboard people in order to get them set up. Right. And they're going to sit down and spend 10 hours convincing each and every vendor in the community that this is how it's real money. This is how you're going to get it back into your bank account. This is how I'm going to show you how to cash it out into reals. Like, it takes real community commitment to make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think potentially if there's, the platforms that are kind of designed already and have that infrastructure can then be leveraged by those communities so they can focus on the internal education without having to focus on the technical development side, I guess, potentially.
Yeah, and I mean, and if I have to tell you, like, if you're interested in starting a community currency using GoodDollar, follow up with me, because we have seen communities effectively use it, but it's not part of what we focused on at the foundation, not because it's not fascinating. It's actually probably my favorite topic area, just because it requires a lot of resources and time and attention to really set those up to succeed.
Well, as a champion of the normies and not a native crypto user or developer, I think that's critical. It's the entry point for people to be able to learn and have an easy UX to engage there. So I appreciate that.
Definitely. Couldn't agree more.
Thanks a lot, Joshua. I love the insight there about just like the on-the-ground requirements and what it takes to do this on a practical level. Thanks for sharing that, Anna. I'm conscious that we've gone over time. Have you got another kind of 5 minutes to take another question, or shall we?
I can take one. Hold on though, because I think my headphones just died. Let me make sure you're still with me. I can take 5 more minutes and take one more question.
Yeah. Can you hear me, guys?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Victor.
Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for organizing this very interesting discussion. My question is based on my experience. So our team is working on first regenerative city in Eastern Europe for some time already, and I'm really interested to know about the practices on there in terms of universal basic income. In Ukrainian, it's called actually unconditional basic income, but I like universal basic income more. And actually, because we have very big category of vulnerable population in Ukraine right now, we are trying to find the way how we can encourage people to be active in community development and how they can participate in community building and further development. So one of the questions, how to use this for vulnerable categories of population. Like in Ukraine, we have war veterans, we have IDPs, we have returning refugees. So we need to make sure that these people will feel comfortable joining this community. And we want temporarily provide them this opportunity of income so they can feel much adjusted to the new environment. But the idea is to help them grow on different level in this community, because we provide also job opportunities and provide different regeneration practices in the city. So what would be your advice? Could it be not for the whole population of the settlement? And this settlement would be pretty huge. It will be more than 25,000 people by our calculations. So basically 1/3 of this population will be vulnerable categories. So we are talking about something around 7,000-8,000 people. So what do you think? Is it possible to deploy this UBI idea to the part of population of this kind of settlement? Thank you.
So first of all, I'd say like one of my favorite software things to remember is that it's all possible, right? It's all possible. However, the question is like what's practical, right? And what's going to actually help you accomplish your objectives. What I would encourage you to do is you're taking on a very ambitious and noble mission in terms of 25,000 people in a refugee camp, and there's going to be a lot of challenges and a lot of learnings as you begin to work. In fact, I would insist that you start with a smaller segment of the population, right, rather than trying to tackle all 25,000 at once. And as a builder, what I would really encourage you to focus on as you get started is what is the key problem for whichever population you choose. What is the really key critical problem that you're trying to solve for? And what are the right metrics that will indicate that you're on the right track, right? So whether that's because when you're dealing with humans, a lot of those metrics are based off of does the work create a real positive impact for the recipients? And that will be critical to you developing a useful system that supports that population and eventually can be scaled to support more and more people, is by being focused on who are you trying to help first, what is the core problem that you're trying to solve, and what does positive traction look like? What does it look like for us? What is the right metric for us to look like to ensure that we're having a positive impact, whether that's kids who are more focused at school, whether that is individuals that start businesses, whether that's individuals whose health outcomes improve. I think you have to be really focused as you get started, and I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Victor, for your question, and good luck with your project. Thanks a lot also, Anna.
Yes, good luck.
Thanks a lot, Anna, for joining us today. I've found it to be extremely fascinating to get more insight into what you're building at GoodDollar, and also I feel like we've had a really interesting conversation around the community currency topic as well. So thank you so much for joining us, and I'd encourage everyone in that joined the spaces to follow Anna, check out GoodDollar on Twitter, and continue to keep up to date with everything that's going on there with that project. Cool. So
thank you guys so much.
No worries, Anna. Thanks again. Looking ahead to next month, we've got Dalton Combs from Jasmine Energy. He's coming in to talk about the future of decentralized energy. And we're really looking forward to that. Also, there's tons of events happening at the moment inside the V DAO community. Hop into the Discord if you want to find out more. We're going to be at MCon. We're heading to Token 2049 in Singapore. Plus, we've got tons of other local community events popping up around the world as well, which we're extremely excited about. If you want to get involved in V DAO, come join us on Discord, follow us on Twitter, or visit our community portal at vdao.io. Thanks a lot, guys, for joining. It's been great, and we'll see you again next month. Cheers, guys.